It's the He Mistook Her for a Swan emergency broadcasting system. Episode 14. The Texas episode.
Great horny toads!
Well, hello there. It is the He Mistook Her for a Swan emergency broadcasting service. Back at it again. Episode 14. That's 4 louder than 10, believe it or not. It is Robbie Robertson's birthday. Happy birthday, Robbie. Everybody go out and listen to some band songs. You know, a good song you should listen to is, there's a song called Katie Been Gone on the Basement Tapes, which was written by Robbie and Richard Manuel. And it's reputedly about Karen Dalton. Go figure about that. So just tying all those loose ends together, before you know it, we're going to have a whole sweater with all these loose ends. It's National Apple Turnover Day. So I can't think of anything bad to say about an apple turnover. I mean, unless you're actually like allergic to apples, then they're good. If you don't like them, you're an idiot.
You idiot!
Yes, also, another important birthday to mark. It is the birthday of the He Mistook Her for a Swan Facebook site. Woo-woo! All right, we've been avoiding it for our entire existence, but the time has come. So we have set up the Facebook site. When I say we, I mean technical support from the bunker. Colleen has set up the Facebook site. She's done a fantastic job. So we'll be pestering you from multiple channels before you know it. I bet you can't wait. It is also our foray into Texas today. So you may think that we are, just a cranky old bunch of Celtic folk guys. Whoa.
When I say whoa, I mean whoa!
We are not just a Celtic folk band. We are a band that takes dark and serious, sad and beautiful music seriously, no matter where it comes from. And in this case, there is some very dark and beautiful music coming out of Texas, in particular in the person of Townes Van Zandt. So we're going to talk a little bit about Townes today and about Texas. Texas has a strange effect on some people. For example, our good friends Handsome Ned and Jim Masick would go down to Texas for extended periods and return with trunks full of Billy Joe Shaver records and other obscure rockabilly, and they would form bands because they knew about all this great cool music before anybody else did. Once upon a time, a bunch of our friends piled into a car and went down to Texas, and two of them that barely knew each other came back married, for God's sakes. And not just married, but a marriage to stand the test of time. It's like the veil of illusion was lifted, and they saw each other, and they went, "Oh, it's you!" What was it? The water, the air, the tequila? I don't know. Something about Texas. It's magical, right? When I was a kid, some of my family friends went off to Texas in the mid-'60s, came back, and lo and behold, one of them was married to a long-haired hippie dude from Texas, and he actually became my mentor. He had the greatest collection of blues records of anybody in Calgary when I was a teenager. He had like 12 different guitars. He had a steel-bodied National guitar from the 30s, which is still one of the greatest guitars I ever played. And he taught me everything about blues, and I think I became a bit of a burden. I remember at one point I went over to their place, which was 1 block away from our house, and they said, "Steve, don't you have any friends?" To which I had to admit that I didn't really, but I had friends. Go on, everybody's got friends. Anyway, it was a big influence on my life, the long-haired Texas hippie dude. So let's talk a bit about Texas. Let's talk about Townes Van Zandt. Let's go down that rabbit hole. What can I say about that? But
Come out of there, you flea-bitten varmint, afore I blast the fur clean off in your carcass!
So, Townes Van Zandt, son of an illustrious Texas family with long history and roots and acclaim. Born in 1944, a prodigy as a child, a genius, you might say. High IQ, did well in school, but like many geniuses, maybe a little too sensitive to the world. Guy Clark, one of the great Texas singer-songwriters, relates the story that when Townes was in high school, one of his teachers was explaining how the sun was going to burn out, and this was a pivotal moment in Townes' life. He's going, "You mean I'm supposed to sit here and like shine my shoes and sit here and be good when the sun is fucking burning out? Are you out of your goddamn minds? The sun's burning out!" Sorry, got a little shaky there. But yeah, he apparently he went off to university. They were kind of grooming him to be either a lawyer or a senator. He was the golden child, but he married a lady, Fran, in university, and she was saying, other people would see a homeless person on the street and just go on with their lives. But with Townes, it affected him so personally that he would end up going out to Skid Row and giving the bums $5, or he'd invite them home. So this is the kind of guy he is. In university, he got a little melancholy and started binge drinking. And apparently the Van Zandt family thought that the way to go was to have him institutionalized and apply some insulin shock therapy, which totally fucked up his brain. So after that, this whole concept of Townes being a senator was off. His long-term memory was shot, but his genius was still there. So he'd been picking on guitar for a while. He saw Elvis in '56, and it changed his life. He thought, well, Elvis, he plays a guitar, he gets chicks. It seems to be a great life. I want to do that. So yeah, he picked up guitar and he started playing. So in around 64, 65, there was this cool little folk scene going on in Houston. There were other cool dudes there. Lightnin' Hopkins was there. Jerry Jeff Walker. I think Guy Clark was there. A bunch of these guys who ended up, just being the idols and the icons of Texas music were there early on. And Townes started playing his songs, mostly covers at a start, but then he started writing. And before long, he gets noticed, because it turns out he is a genius at writing. He can express such deep emotions and feelings and just and stories in song. Other people are astounded. Emmylou Harris recalls seeing him in '69, and she said, "I could not believe what I was seeing. It was like Hank Williams had come back to life, but with a weird twist." He recorded a bunch of albums, 6 or 7 albums, in the late 60s, early 70s, and those are his greatest works, although he continued recording right to the end of his short life. And he kept writing these unbelievable songs, and everywhere he went, the people who saw him couldn't look away. It was just like spellbinding, his songs. We remember Joe Ely picked him up. He was hitchhiking from Lubbock back to Houston. And Townes had no money. He had no change of clothes. The only thing he had was a little knapsack with a bunch of his records in it. So he gave Joe Ely one of his records. And Joe and Jimmy Dale Gilmore went back home. And they put on this record. And it was like they were speaking to space or God or something. They just went over it and over it. They could not believe what they were hearing. It affected them so profoundly, and it affected the the way that Texas music was going. Later on, even though he made all these records, he resisted success. He would never on a major record label. He lived in seedy motels and like off the grid little shacks. Even when it seems like he was kind of making money, he resisted success. I think in the early 70s, he had a manager earlier on. He changed managers. His manager ended up being John Lomax III, who's the nephew of Alan Lomax. Remember Alan, who interviewed Jelly Roll Morton? Weird little thing. So this Lomax set up a little fan club for Townes, thinking, nothing's going to happen. But it turns out people are writing in going, holy shit, these songs changed my life. They saved my life. They turned my life around. These are world-changing songs for me personally. All these people writing in. Yeah. That was one of Townes' goals. He said, if I could just write a song that would save somebody's life, then mission accomplished. That's what I want to do. So pretty serious goal there for a singer-songwriter. I don't know if Britney Spears thinks that way, or Kanye West, or whoever you want to name. I don't know if they think that way. Maybe they do. Anyway, so Townes, continuing on, he's developing a pretty serious drinking habit and a pretty serious drug habit. But still, he's churning out these songs. In the early 80s, Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard are convinced to record his song Poncho and Lefty. It's a smash hit. And Emmylou Harris records some of his songs. A bunch of people just start recording his songs. Everybody wants to record his songs because they're so frickin' great. Meanwhile, he's like living in a shack somewhere, playing with guns and empty bottles around and stuff like that. Steve Earle hooks up with him. Steve, back in those days, a bit of an idiot. You idiot! Starts playing around with a gun at a party. And Townes looks at him and goes, you want to play around with guns? I'll show you how to play around with guns. Townes picks up his own gun, puts a couple bullets in the cylinder, spins it around a couple times, puts it to his head. Click, click, click. Was it 2 times or 3 times? There is debate, but there's no debate that he did it. And that's the kind of guy he was. A bit serious, a bit loosely tethered to the earth, you might say. Steve got the message there. Later on, when Steve was in the depths of his addiction problems, apparently a bunch of his friends had a little intervention. And who do they send? They send Townes. So Steve looks up and he sees Townes walk in and he says, holy shit, I must be in deep trouble if they send you, the worst of all people in terms of addiction. So anyway, Steve ended up being a huge Townes booster and supporter. Later on in life, Townes is, his shows are legendary for either being unbelievably good or unbelievably bad. Like if he's been drinking too much, it just kind of goes downhill and maybe never recovers. But if he's on, it's like, the Michelangelo finger of God has come down and touched the world. So he keeps playing these songs, keeps writing these songs. People love him. Even though he's making all this dough off of Poncho and Lefty, he's still living in shacks and cheap motels and stuff. He never really lived an affluent life. Later on, our Canadian content here, our friends, the Timmins clan of the Cowboy Junkies, they asked Townes to open up for them on their tour. And I bet there's some stories there. I'll have to ask Mike. So anyway, end of story. Townes is his health is deteriorating. He's about 50 years old. 52 years old. He is actually invited by the guys from Sonic Youth to do another album, and he wants to do it. But he gets up one day and falls down. It turns out he broke his hip, but he didn't know, so he just didn't go to the doctor for a while. And eventually they went to the doctor and had a bunch of operations, and the doctors say he's got to stay here. You know, he's severely addicted, and we have the tools to deal with it, but he was having none of that, so we went home, and he pretty much died after that. So that is the sad story of Townes Van Zandt, one of the greatest songwriters of the last 50 years for sure. He's up there with anybody else you could name, anybody else you could compare. And it's not just me saying he's great. The greats acknowledge that he's great. Bob Dylan went out of his way to try and contact Townes because he wanted to work with him. Bob Dylan wanted to work with Townes. Townes was having none of it. I guess there's a famous story, as Steve Earle said, he thinks Townes is a better songwriter than Bob, and he said, "I'll stand on Bob's coffee table in my cowboy boots and say so." Both Steve and Townes regretted that statement later on. They thought, you're a freaking idiot. But, later on Townes said, he says, "I've seen Bob Dylan's bodyguards, and I don't think they're letting me on his coffee table." So there you go. Townes Van Zandt, legendary songwriter. And he mistook her for Swan. We do one of his songs, Black Crow Blues. Lots of local guys do his songs. John Bora does some of his songs. The Cowboy Junkies do some of his songs. Everybody does his songs because his songs are so great. You should go out and listen to some of his songs. I'm going to play one, okay? There's a song, it's not his, it's called Cocaine, that he learned from Hoyt Axton, but it was part of his set. And we're going to do that, all right? See you in a minute. All right, the late, great Townes Van Zandt. That was the name of his album, one of his albums that he put out while he was still living. He was a funny man, for all his darkness, he was a prankster and a joker as well. Once when Steve Earle was asking for advice on what to do, Townes was Steve's great mentor. Townes said, "You need to read War and Peace." So Steve goes off, and I don't know how long it took him. He comes back and he says, "Okay, I read the whole War and Peace. I got lots of questions." And Townes goes, "Well, I don't know. I never read it. I just thought you should." Now, that's a good joke. All right, so Cocaine. Hoyt Axton did this song, and when he introduces it, he said, "The next song deals with a commodity which in its heyday was better than bufferin'," which I find amusing. I don't even remember what bufferin' does exactly, but so here's the thing. Townes learned the song from Hoyt Axton. Hoyt and Townes' version are very similar. There's an older version, which I learned from the Reverend Gary Davis. Now, the Reverend Gary Davis was a fellow who was a elderly blues statesman who was actually critical in passing along the blues information to the young white guys in New York City. And they just hung around him like flies, and he would just every once in a while go, "Well, it goes like this." And he was a great teacher, and he was a great mentor to all those guys. And we're talking mentors today. So the Reverend was one of the great mentors of all time. And of course, Townes was a mentor to Steve Earle, but maybe not the greatest. One of the guys that Reverend Gary Davis was a mentor to was Dave Van Ronk, who was, one of the first guys in the New York folk scene. He does a version of this as well. Strangely enough, Mississippi John Hurt has another version too. So the weird thing is, here I'll give you a little guitar tip, guitar nerds. So the secret to the Reverend's version is it's in C, but he never hits the C. See, he's got his finger on the G. Never leaves there. He never hits the tonic. He never hits that note. So he's going. Hits the F. All right, so this is the Revs version. The thing is, in the Revs version and John's version, there's really kind of two parts. There's the verse and a chorus. And the Rev has got a bit of an instrumental part too, because he's a bit of a whiz. So let's try that. Here's the Rev. Come on, baby, dressed in white. Come on, baby, won't you stay all night? Cocaine all around my brain. Here's the chorus. Oh, baby, please come quick. That old cocaine, she's making me sick. Cocaine all around my brain. John Hurt. Yon come a baby all dressed in blue. Said, baby, what you gonna do? Cocaine. Oh, you old cocaine. Oh, baby, won't you get here quick? That old cocaine is making me sick. Cocaine all around my brain. Now when Hoyt gets the song, he gets rid of the verse-chorus concept, and it's just all one thing. But it's pretty cool, like this. You get a hit, woman, I thought you understood. You ain't got no connection, and you know damn good. Cocaine, oh yeah, you old cocaine. Low, low, yeah. Cocaine, cocaine, run around my heart, run around my brain. Cocaine, oh, you old cocaine, low, low. And Townes is pretty much like Hoyt, a little simple. Cocaine's for horses, it's not for men. Doctor says that's to kill you, but it won't say when. Cocaine all around my brain, oh yeah. Early one morning, about 4:30, that cocaine come knocking on my back door. Cocaine all around my brain, yeah, yeah. Oh, hey baby, better get here quick. That old cocaine is making me sick. Cocaine all around my brain. Back to the Rev. Cocaine. Don't do it, just listen to it, all right? Or you will get in more trouble than you need. Adios, amigos.